Meenal, can you call Neha and ask her to immediately join?
I will. She's been trying. She's been waiting. Switch the recording off, Usha.
Yeah, 1 second. 1 second.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you can't see me, no?
No, we can't see you, but that's all right. If we can hear you very well.
Okay, so then what I'll do is, because people are losing their time, I will avoid any introduction and thanking to Asiatic Society and Durga Bhagwat, etc. And I'll straight go to the talk.
No, we can do that, but I'd like to give an introduction to Durga Bhagwat and to both of you.
Shall I do the whole, shall I start now?
No, may I give the introduction, Dr. Jain?
Uh-huh.
No, I will give the introduction and then Dr. Garimella will tell you when you have to start.
Yeah, okay.
All right? Is that okay?
Yeah,
as I'd explained to you? So I will now start. I will need to tell you a little about about Durga Bhagwat. And don't worry about the time. Even if we exceed it by a little, there's no problem. You say exactly what you'd like to. Okay? So good evening, everybody. I'm so sorry about this delay.
No, sorry. I'm sorry because such a thing never happened in my life.
Well, there's always a first time for everything. So I am Meenal Shirsagar. As chairperson of the Endowment Lectures Committee of the Asiatic Society of Mumbai, it is my privilege to welcome you here today on behalf of our society for the 10th Durga Bhagwat Memorial Lecture. We are deeply honored that Professor Dr. Jyotindra Jain, the preeminent scholar of Indian arts, cultural historian, and museologist, has accepted our invitation to deliver his lecture. He will speak on the Ferocious Consort, the goddess and the buffalo in sub-canonical Indian mythology, ritual, and art. We are also honored that Dr. Annapurna Garibella, a renowned art historian, will preside over this lecture. I thank our two outstanding scholars for being with us for this prestigious lecture. I'd like to tell you a little about Durga Bhagwat, even though she is very well known. So, the late Durga Bhagwat was among India's foremost scholars, researchers, and writers. Her notable work in folklore, Buddhist literature, and anthropology is widely recognized and has won much acclaim. Her lyrical prose and impressionistic style of writing has remained with us readers, as has her incredible body of work. We also remember her straightforwardness, endless curiosity, constant search for knowledge, and her interest in all walks of life, even when she was 90 years old. Durga Bai, as she was addressed, had a multifaceted personality. She was a Gandhian activist in her college days and remained so in its true sense till the very last. Her love of freedom was seen in 1975 during the emergency, when she wrote and spoke fearlessly against the establishment, prevailing systems, and the government. As a matter of policy and on principle, she had refused to accept any honors or awards offered by the government after the emergency. She was unafraid to express her opinions, however unpopular they were. Her value-based, independent, and transparently honest personality was a role model for many. She was, one could say, an intellectual scholar spokesperson of the common people. Durga Bhagwat was elected president of the 51st Marathi Sahitya Sammelan, held in Karad in 1975. She was the second woman president of the Sammelan after Kusumavati Deshpande since its inception in 1878. Before chairing this Sammelan, she had been elected chairperson of the Tamasgar meet and considered it a great honor. Her idols throughout her life had been Vyas, Gautam Buddha, Adi Shankaracharya, the American philosopher Henry David Thoreau, and the writer Sridhar Ketkar. Durga Bhagwat's notable works include Pais, a collection of articles based on religions, their literatures and practices, and Vyas Parva, a book about her study of the Mahabharata. Her book, Ritu Chakra, detailing nature, particularly trees and flowers in each Indian month, is perhaps her most famous work. Interestingly, she also wrote many articles on cooking and crafts and was known as the Marathi Saraswati Chi Saraswati. This endowment was established through public donations in 2011 in her memory. Under the endowment, an annual lecture is held on a topic drawn from fields that Durga Bai had engaged with, namely anthropology, folk art, religious traditions, culture, and literature. The first lecture was held in 2012 by our society. I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Jyotindra Jain. Just a minute, please. I just have to admit a few people who are here and come back to that. Okay. So we have with us today a highly renowned scholar on folk and ritual arts of India, Professor Jyotindra Jain, formerly director of the National Crafts Museum, Professor of Arts and Aesthetics, Jawaharlal Nehru University, and member secretary of the Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts, was a visiting professor at Harvard University, at Humboldt University, Berlin, and a Getty distinguished professor at JNU. An eminent scholar of Indian arts, Professor Jain has extensively published in the areas of his specialization and curated exhibitions shown in some of the most respected institutions in India and abroad. Professor, I'd like to mention just a few of his publications. Ganga Devi, Tradition and Expression in Mithila Painting, 1996. Jain Iconography, Objects of Meditation and the Pantheon with Eberhard Fischer in 1997. Other Masters, 5 Contemporary Folks and Tribal Artists of India, 1998. Kalighat Painting, Images from a Changing World, 1999. Indian Terracotta, 1999. India's Popular Culture, Iconic Spaces and Fluid Images in 2007. Professor Jain is a recipient of the Prince Claus Award for Culture, the Netherlands, in 1998, and the Cross of the Order of Merit, Federal Republic of Germany, in 2018. We are proud to say that Professor Jain is a fellow of the Asiatic Society of Mumbai. So thank you very much indeed, Dr. Jain, for being with us. I'll just admit a few people. Our chairperson today, Dr. Annapurna Garibella, I'm so happy to introduce her. She is a designer and an art historian. Her research focuses on late medieval Indic architecture and the history and practices of vernacular, visual, and built cultures in India after independence. Garimella is the managing trustee of Art, Resources, and Teaching Trust, a not-for-profit organization which has a research library dedicated to art, architecture, design, and craft histories. She conducts independent research projects and does teaching and advisement for college and university students and the general public. He also heads Jackfruit Research and Design, an organization with a specialized portfolio of design, research, and curation. Jackfruit's recent curatorial projects include Vernacular in the Contemporary, Devi Art Foundation, Delhi, Mutable, Ceramic and Clay Art in India since 1947, Pyramid Museum of Art, and Barefoot School of Craft in Goa, Serendipity Arts Festival 2017 to 18. Her newest book is a co-edited Marg volume titled The Contemporary Hindu Temple, Fragments for a History, 2019. And her upcoming edited volume is titled The Long Arc of South Asian Art, a reader in honor of Vidya Daheja, 2021. Her forthcoming publication is Digesting the Past, the Discourse of Sacralized Architectural Renovation in Southern India, 14th to 17th centuries. This is a book manuscript under preparation. So we are honored to have you too, Dr. Garimella, and I now hand over the proceedings to you. We look forward to a vibrant and scintillating exposition and discussion. Over to you, Dr. Garimella.
Thank you so much, Meenalji and Dr. Jain, for inviting me to participate in today's session and to chair it. I want to say thank you on behalf of all the audience and also the Asiatic Society, to Dr. Jain, to delivering this lecture in such a timely moment. It is Dasara after all. And the beautiful thing about a lecture on this topic at this time is that while we're immersed in festivities, Dr. Jain is giving us a chance to reflect on the long roots, the long horizons, the past horizons and the future horizons of the Devi, and her relationship with the buffalo, who was both a devotee and a demon. Thank you so much, Dr. Jain, for giving us this lecture today.
Thank you.
I would like to request everyone in the audience to please mute yourself. It is very difficult to speak when so many people's microphones are not muted. Thank you.
Shall I start? Hello?
Start, Dr. Jain.
Yes, can I start?
Please start,
Yes,
Dr.
please
Jain.
start. Please start.
Yeah. Okay. Friends, I'm honored that the Asiatic Society of Mumbai has invited me to deliver the 10th Durga Bhagwat Endowment lecture. I'm grateful to Professor Srimati Meenal Kshirsagar and Dr. Srimati Usha Vijayalakshmi for organizing this talk. Dear Annapurna, I'm so glad that you have agreed to preside over this evening's function. Thank you so much. And I must add that we miss you in Delhi. I cannot see the audience, but my thanks to all of you who are attending the talk this evening. I'm particularly glad to deliver this lecture because I was introduced to Professor Durga Bhagwat's work when I was a student at Mumbai's St. Xavier's College, where she too had studied a couple of decades before me. Her exploration of the folk and tribal culture of India has always been an inspiration to me. With these brief introductory remarks, I start my talk this evening. I hope the first slide is on the screen. Hello?
Yes, it's there. Yes, it's
Yes, okay.
there. And it's perfect.
Okay. So, put in a nutshell, the later Enlightenment era and the rise of neoclassicism in Europe coincided with the colonization of India and elsewhere. It was at this juncture that Indology, as Sanskrit philology, was born. You see, Indology meant initially only Sanskrit philology. So it has a lot of importance in my talk this evening, that at this juncture that Indology as Sanskrit philology was born, leading to the primacy of Sanskrit canon-based literature as well as art and architecture, which began to be designated as classical, largely covering the Shastric or the constituted canon-based arts patronized and exhausted by the upper caste. So what I'm trying to say, how this notion, divisive notion of classical and vernacular, etc., entered historically, that it was during the colonial period that since there was a search in Europe about revival of classicism, and at that time India was also colonized, and therefore the notion of classical was brought and was sort of lionized in various ways as the kind of having extraordinary credibility in Indian culture. So ever since, the literary, performative, ritualistic, or visual expressions of the tribal and ritual population began to be ranked low in the hierarchy of the arts, for which I have provisionally used the term sub-canonical in the title of my talk. Along the line, the Hindu scriptures began to be treated as the fountainhead of the rest of the literature and mythology of the subcontinent, which was mainly preserved in the vernacular traditions. Almost all the regional myths, containing even the slightest possible allusion to any of the scriptural Hindu myths, came to be considered as regional derivatives of the Sanskrit origins, meaning Sanskrit was classical, it was the fountainhead from which everything had emanated and spread all over India. So this was the kind of thinking initially, and particularly in the context when something which was related to Sanskritic literature was as if only derived from, so the rest was all derivative kind of. It was firmly believed that Sanskrit versions were the archetypal myths and that the vernacular ones were degenerate renderings of the former. Can you all hear me?
Hear you really well. Perfect.
Okay, great. In this context, let me briefly invoke three cultural concepts derived from Indian linguistics, namely Prakrit, Sanskrit, and Apabhramsha. Prakrit stood for the original, normal, natural, spoken. You know, the word Prakriti, natural, nature, comes from the same root, and therefore it was something that Prakrit, it was done before, existed before. Then Sanskrit, Sanskrit was kind of it stood for, if you separate the two words, it is Samaha Krita. So S is the Visarga, and therefore Samaha Krita is Sanskrit, meaning put together, constructed, and refined, which denoted the Brahmanic canons and practices. And third category, which is very important, is Apabhramsha. You know the word Bhrashta, meaning deteriorated or fallen. Apabhramsha stood for the corrupted or degenerated and refers to vernacularization of the Sanskrit origins. So often it was believed that a lot of folk culture and myths, they were kind of Apabhramsha, which may not always be true. And some of the Apabhramsha might be comparable to or may connect with the vernacular traditions. For centuries, these three streams have flowed together, parallel or intertwined. And I think intertwined is very important because nothing remained isolated. They were all sort of intermixing and due to movements and things. So these three streams had also intertwined. In this background, I shall examine the Sanskrit myth of Mahishasuramardini as narrated in the Devi Mahatmya of the Markandeya Purana of 6th century. Now, you know, dating Purana so straight as like 6th century, 7th is not right. Those who know Puranic literature, they know that portions of one Purana were interpolated into another. And this was a continuous process. And therefore, some passages might be 6th century or 7th century or 8th century, but an entire Purana can't be dated to a particular century. But for the practical reason at the moment, we might say that Markandeya Purana, which contains Devi Mahatmya, might be from 6th century. Vis-a-vis a few typical examples, so I will do this myth vis-a-vis a few typical examples of the living vernacular traditions of Rajasthan, Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, and Tamil Nadu. By comparison of the so-called classical and vernacular material, I shall reconstruct a configurative picture of the motif rather than a linear or historical one, because it is not possible with folk material to make anything linear, and even a lot of Sanskrit literature, there are a lot of dating problems, and we are not interested. I'm not interested in that kind of dating at the moment, but I'm talking about a kind of configurative figure. So in this background, let us deal with two most perplexing and widespread interrelated iconographic motifs in Indian art and visual culture, namely, next slide please, namely that of the goddess Durga annihilating Mahishasura, the buffalo demon, that's one, and that of the goddess Kali trampling upon the body of her consort Shiva. Now these two, are these on the screen?
They
Are
are.
these images on the screen?
Yes, they are. They're both on the
Okay.
screen.
Now, okay. Inspired by the work of David Schulman, an extraordinary scholar of Tamil culture in southern India, and that of Günther Sontheimer and D.D. Kosambi. Günther Sontheimer was a German, and I had the honor of teaching a few seminars with him in Heidelberg when I was a Humboldt fellow there. Extraordinary scholar, unfortunately he died young. And D.D. Kosambi, you all know. So their work in Maharashtra, Schulman's work in South India, which brought into focus the complex relationship between the goddess and the buffalo, often verging on the conjugal and the erotic. So you see, Schulman taking a link from Kosambi and others, explored in Tamil Nadu the myths. I think dozens of myths he collected, and he published in a book called Tamil Temple Myths. And he also wrote an article called Murderous Bride, the Goddess and the Buffalo. Now, I conducted, so this work is in the background for me, and I conducted extensive field work in the rural and tribal areas of Rajasthan and Gujarat in the 1970s and 80s, with the same objective, because they all suggested, particularly Kosambi suggested that similar myths must exist in other parts of India. So I took the challenge and did a lot of field work in both these areas, Rajasthan and Gujarat, partly in Madhya Pradesh. Now here too, I came across similar mythology, rituals, and visual depictions of the goddess consorting the buffalo whom she finally kills. This is a very kind of a motif that continuously prevails. This cumulative material, meaning what Schulman did and what Kosambi did and what Sontheimer did, this cumulative and what I collected led me to understand how some of the pan-Indian living vernacular ritual practices and visual culture can become instrumental in resolving the most perplexing themes and iconographies of the goddess and the buffalo and of Kali trampling upon the body of her spouse Shiva. Let us first look at the Hindu canonical story of the goddess killing Mahishasura and other demons, and then comparatively examine the non-Sanskritic regional myths of the goddess and the buffalo. Next slide, please. The most, okay.
Dr. Jain, 1 minute. I'm
Okay.
requesting all the participants to please mute themselves. There's a problem. I think people are trying to answer phone calls or do other things and they're unmuting themselves. It's already interfering with the lecture.
Okay.
Mute yourself. Thank you.
You got the slide?
Sir.
Yeah.
It's there in front of us.
Okay. The most formidable Sanskrit story is that of the Devi Mahatmya of the Markandeya Purana, as I mentioned, which starts with the archetypal Hindu motif of the conflict between the Devas and the Asuras, in which, in the first part, the goddess kills the demon Madhu and Kaitava, in the second part, Mahisha, and in the third part, Rakta Bija, Chandamunda, and Shumba Nishumba. So here you can see, very important is particularly in this slide, is the goddess's foot, which is on the buffalo. And this foot has a lot to do with Kali trampling upon Shiva and also trampling of the buffalo and local rituals. I will come to that in the course of this talk. Next slide, please. Okay.
No, Neha, could you please, whoever's controlling the slides, could you please put yourself back on the screen? We're not able to see the slides.
Is it
Thank
there?
you. It's coming, Dr. Jain, yes.
Okay.
Can you show the next slide, Neha? Can you move to the next slide, please? Yes, it's there on the screen. Thank you. It's the Chamba painting.
Great. Devi Mahatmya says, while killing Mahisha, the goddess jumped and landed herself on the great Asura and pressing her foot, look again the recurrence of pressing of her foot, on his throat, struck him with a spear. Thereupon, trampled upon under her foot, the Asura half issued forth from his buffalo mouth in his real human form. The goddess cut off his head with her great sword. This is again a classical Devi Mahatmya reference. And again, you can notice the foot by which she is pressing the body of the buffalo. Devi Mahatmya further says, but from his stricken body, the blood flowed profusely. I'm really sorry this evening, we're all going to have your dinner later on, but there's a lot of reference to blood. But the rituals that I have observed and what we see in the painting, I'm establishing a little bit of a relationship. Devi Mahatmya further says, but from his stricken body, do you have the fifth slide? Next slide, please.
Neha, can you go to the next? Yes, it's on the screen, Dr. Jain.
Okay, great. So Devi Mahatmya further says, but from his stricken body, the blood flowed profusely. Chamunda licked it with her mouth. So Chamunda is the combination of Chanda and Munda, as we know. And the matrikas born from the bodies of the gods on the left side, gods danced being intoxicated with blood. Now it's interesting that in Devi Mahatmya itself, there is a reference in that very passage. It says, Devi Mukhena Jagrahe Rakta Bijasya Shonitam. Devi sucked the blood by her mouth, the blood of Rakta Bija. In living rituals too, blood is sucked from the artery of the sacrificial animal, and that's why I'm bringing this in. I myself feel it's a bit of a bibhatsya, but I think it is very important because I have seen these rituals and that there's a reference of blood sucking in Sanskrit literature itself. In the Devi Mahatmya, the various demons enchanted by the goddess make a proposal of marriage to her. Let me now contextualize the Sanskrit canonical story, which I briefly mentioned now, in the broad spectrum of the regional vernacular myths spread all over the Indian subcontinent. I shall start with the southern Indian examples based on the work of Henry Whitehead, Whitehead was documenting, he's done extraordinary documentation in southern India of regional practices in 1918, 1920. He was active and done very accurate documentation by visiting shrines and recording myths and things. So Henry White, and the book of his called Village Gods of South India was published in 1921. So Annapurna, you might like to see this book if you're not, but you may be knowing it in any case. So Henry Whitehead and David Schudman then go over, I will refer to these two people and go over to myths and motifs from Gujarat and Rajasthan based on my own fieldwork. So I will take the South Indian material from Henry Whitehead and Schulman, and then my own material from Gujarat and Rajasthan. As described by Henry Whitehead and analyzed by Schulman, the male god, this is very important and please pay attention. The male god in many South Indian villages is still often a buffalo king, Poturaju, in Telugu areas. Sometimes he is the husband of the goddess. Now, this is what Henry White has recorded, that sometimes he is the husband of the goddess. In the sacrificial rituals, next please. Okay.
There on the screen.
Yeah. In the sacrificial rituals, in the Telugu country, a buffalo is married to the goddess.
Electricity has come.
Oh yeah, the electricity has now come. So shall we continue this way? I'm quite happy doing this.
Please
No,
continue this way if you're
continue.
comfortable.
Yes, I think you should
Continue, yeah.
continue.
Okay, so in the sacrificial rituals in the Telugu country, a buffalo is married to the goddess. This buffalo is designated as, and please listen carefully, Gauda Kona or husband buffalo. I hope you got this because this is very important to compare with other myths. That in Telugu country, a buffalo is married to the goddess. This buffalo is designated as Gauda Kona or husband buffalo. And after the sacrifice of the buffalo, this is again very important. After the sacrifice of the buffalo, the wedding ceremony is repeated with a new buffalo, lest she be left a widow. So after sacrificing, again, a new buffalo she's married to. So the picture which is in front of you, in the right side bottom corner, you see a pole-like thing where the buffalo is. It's a kind of stone symbol of Poturaju with a stake for impaling animals, meaning a buffalo. So sacrifice, etc., is done there. The sacrifice of the goddess's consort is explained by a Telugu myth as recorded by Whitehead in 1921. No, published in 1921. According to it, listen to this story, it's very interesting. According to it, an outcast man fraudulently marries a Brahmin girl who, on realizing the truth, commits suicide by putting her own house on fire. On account of her virtue of expiation of the sin of marrying an outcast, expiation meaning she killed herself. So she recognized the sin and she killed herself. So this is expiation of the sin of marrying an outcast. She appeared in the village. Next, please.
Next image.
Is it there?
Yes, it has come.
Okay. So on account of her virtue of expiation of the sin of marrying an outcast, she appears in the village in her divine form as Orama. It also means village goddess, and tells the villagers that as per her dying wish, the villagers should behead her husband in front of her and sever his leg and put it in his mouth. And place the fat of his stomach on his head. Now this thing of putting the leg in the mouth, Can you see in the left side bottom, the head of the buffalo and the leg is put in the mouth?
Yes.
Yeah. Now this I was wondering what it was, but as I read more documentation around Whitehead, I found that this is a form of humbling yourself. So there was a custom even for some people who went to, some small people who went to big zamindar, they went with a kind of blade of grass in their mouth and set near their feet to show that they were humbled. And therefore, this you can see that buffalo thing, the leg in the mouth of the. So this is also a photograph taken by him, and placed the fat on his stomach, off his stomach on his head. This is exactly the same fashion a buffalo is sacrificed in the region. So the husband was treated like that. The lower caste, so to say, husband was treated like that on her dying wish, and he was killed, but he was killed as if they are sacrificing a buffalo. So the whole ritual was like buffalo sacrifice. In the next birth, the husband is reborn as a buffalo, which is sacrificed to the village goddess in the same manner as killing her pariah husband. Ever since, a buffalo is sacrificed to the goddess periodically. Now, this was a description of Telugu country. As pointed out by Schulman, David Schulman, extraordinary scholar, in the Tamil Arunachal Puranam. Schulman refers to Tamil Arunachal Puranam and says the Devi or Parvati was approached by sages complaining about the atrocities caused by the demon Mahisha. Devi commanded Durga to kill Mahisha, which she did. But as she took the decapitated head of Mahisha, she found a crystal linga, phallus, worn in his neck. Now, this is a description in Arunachal Puran, but also in Sanskritic Northern Indian Puran, there are echoes of this belief that the buffalo was wearing in his neck a crystal linga or a phallus symbol of Shiva. So Shulman comments, Mahisha as the bearer of the linga is said to partake of Shiva's own form, and it is the murder of Shiva himself which is implicitly attributed to Devi, for which she had to undertake expiation. So she was then sent to the Himalayas and she had to practice austerities and things like that for having killed Shiva. So you see, there are these echoes of this kind of relationship with Buffalo, Shiva, and the Devi. And when we come to the local myths, you will see that how they become important material, if not exactly and categorically to understand it, but still the echoes themselves are important. In Maharashtra, as recorded by D.D. Kosambi in 1962 and by G.D. Sondheimer, the German scholar I mentioned from Heidelberg, in 1976, the deity Masoba, with buffalo, appears in some stories as the victim of the goddess, while in other her consort, a form of Shiva himself. These stories hint at conjugality of the goddess and the buffalo. These stories hint at conjugality of the goddess and the buffalo. Now, let me present to you the mythology and rituals of the buffalo bridegroom and the goddess as observed by me between 1970s and 1980s in Rajasthan and Gujarat. These 2 years I was roaming in Rajasthan. I was so excited. I was young and I was so excited with particularly Kosambi's remark that such material can be found elsewhere. And they had worked, others had worked in southern India, in Tamil Nadu, and in Andhra, and we had worked in Maharashtra. So I just went looking for myths and then observed for months long, documenting, photographing rituals and tape recording myths and things. So from that, I'm shortening my material. My material runs into dozens of pages, but for our short of time, I could only refer to briefly these myths. According to a myth of the Bhil and Meena tribes of South Rajasthan, the goddess Bhavani. Now, note the word Bhavani. They have the word Bhavani. So we are talking of currents running parallel and entwined. So goddess Bhavani preparing for her wedding. There's a song of invocation which I recorded, in which the goddess Bhavani is preparing for her wedding. Ganesha comes and looks for when is the bridegroom coming, etc. So receives the news. Then the goddess receives the news that the bridegroom was a buffalo. She and her accomplished goddesses kill the bridegroom and feast on him. Then, important, one goddess remarks, "O sister, you have a strange custom of hanging the blood-dripping intestine of the bridegroom on a banyan tree." A banyan tree is also the seat of Bhairav, and therefore relation to Shiva. I have recorded several myths pertaining to the motive of the goddess and the buffalo in Western India, but due to shortage of time, I shall briefly refer to three more versions, very, very briefly. First is from Saurashtra, Kathiawar, Kutch, and Sindh region. Both myths, first two myths are from that region. Now, I must say something about the Charan community in Gujarat, Sindh, and please have the next slide, please. So, Charan community, among them, there is a German scholar called Westphal Hellbusch, Sigrid von Westphal Hellbusch, and she has published an extraordinary study of Charan community and the living goddesses of Charans. So, Charan girl, when even she was 1 day old, when she was just born, she was referred to as I. And even today in Gujarat, if you go to any Charan home, the women are treated as goddesses. So this is kind of, even today, it's a living custom over there. So they also have a surname called Gadvi. In Gujarat, many people are Gadvis are bards and singers, and they are bards formerly attached to the kings to keep dynastic records and things. Now, there was a man called Surmalya Gadvi. He was a Charan. Now, this Charan, one more thing, that, they perform something called Tragu in Gujarati. And Tragu means they threaten a person who attacked them by killing themselves. And there are many memorial stones in Gujarat everywhere where a person, a man or a woman, are shown carved on the memorial stone, putting a dagger in their own neck to kill themselves, to save themselves from the attacker, and they declare that if you attack, we will do this. So there were three women called Bhoot, Balal, and Bahuchara. Bahuchara is a very renowned Gujarat goddess who is nowadays also connected with the eunuchs in Gujarat. Now, so both Balal and Bahuchara were traveling in the region of Kolis, and the Kolis attacked them. So they did a trago, and all three of them chopped off their, because they were Charan women, they chopped off their breasts and killed themselves. And then they became goddesses, and their shrines are even now popular in Gujarat, and particularly of Bahuchara. So this is about Charan. So Surmalya Gadvi was a Charan. He was a bard of Ra Kavat, the king of Junagadh. Surmalya had 7 divine daughters. The king desired to marry one of the 7 sisters. As the girl refused his offer, is the slide there? Next one.
Yes, it is.
There are fish on the left side?
Yes, there are fish on the left side.
Yeah.
7 of them.
Okay. So the king desired to marry one of the 7 sisters. As the girl refused his offer, the king ordered the father to put all his daughters in a pond who became fish, after which he killed the girl's father. The sisters, who were living goddesses, decided to avenge their father's death, saying, "The king has killed our father, now we shall kill his Dait buffalo. Dait means Daitya. So they pronounce Dait. So we will kill his buffalo. The seven sisters called the Mahakali of Pavagadh in Gujarat and Khodiar, another goddess of Junagadh, and battled the king's buffalo overnight and finally killed him, drank his blood, and feasted upon his flesh. Notably, as Khodiar, Khodiar meaning somebody who is lame, a Khodo, Khodiar, so the Gujarati word Khodiar stands for somebody who is limping or who is lame. So notably as Khodiar, the lame one, who while running with the captured buffalo fell down from the fort wall and became lame. I'm asking a question. Was this a price for harming Shiva's devotee? We have seen earlier the crystal linga and punishment of expiation. This is comparable to Parvati's expiation after killing Mahishasura in Arunachal Puran, mentioned earlier, an issue of guilt and punishment. Another story from Gujarat, Hamir Sumra, the ruler of Sindh. Once upon a time, this was all one cultural region around the Thar Desert. So Baluch, right up to Baluchistan, the Gujarati goddesses have come from Sindh and Baluchistan and entered Kutch and spread all over Kathiawar. In another story from Gujarat, Hamir Sumra, the ruler of Sindh, wanted to marry Awad, a living goddess of the Charan community. When Awad refused to comply, her father was killed by Hamir. As Awad planned to destroy Hamir, he put a massive buffalo in her path. You notice that one after the other, somehow or the other, the buffalo comes in, either in the context of Shiva, but even otherwise in the context of the king. And when we talk of king, don't forget Poturazu. So he was killed by Hamir. As Awad planned to destroy Hamir, he put a massive buffalo in her path. This slide was there. No? Yeah. So wait. She killed the buffalo, drank his blood, and then was enkindled to kill Hamir, which she did. So she was, and Charan women are renowned and recorded all throughout 19th and early 20th century record of their practice of killing the buffalo or the enemy and drinking the blood. In 1980, I recorded an outstanding myth of the Wagri community in a village near Ahmedabad, wherein the goddess is depicted as deeply enamored of a young buffalo to the extent of being unfaithful to Mahadev. I hope you got what I'm saying. And please have the next slide over there.
Yes, Dr. Jain, it's come.
Okay. So the myth, that the story that I'll read out is illustrated on this textile, which is from, let us say, 1940s or so. Now, in 1980, I reread it. In 1980, I recorded an astonishing myth of the Wagri community in a village near Ahmedabad, wherein the goddess is depicted as deeply enamored of a young buffalo to the extent of being unfaithful to Mahadev. Portions of this narrative are illustrated on textile pieces from Gujarat, which you see on the screen. Let me present a brief summary of the story and images of the ritual of the buffalo sacrifice that followed after the narration of the story. Now I will show you the. I just drank water. Okay, now I have done a brief summary of a long story that they narrated to me on record. Once upon a time, Mahadev and Parvati were roaming around the earth, riding their bull vehicle, Nandi. Passing by a pond, they came across a young, lustrous buffalo struggling to survive. Parvati asked Mahadev to bring the buffalo back to life. Now listen what I'm saying carefully. The narrator said, knowing well Parvati's infatuation for the buffalo, Mahadev refused to accede to her wish. Did you get this?
Yes.
Okay. As Parvati was adamant, she said, no, I have to I have to cure the buffalo. You have to cure the buffalo. As Parvati was adamant, Mahadev rejuvenated the buffalo using his magical weapons, which were in his matted hair, on a condition that she would not take the buffalo along. As both continued their journey on their bull vehicle, Parvati was sort of pillion riding. So the journey on their bull vehicle, Parvati turned back and asked the buffalo to follow.
Ah,
On their way, they decided to take rest in a cave. Next slide, please. I'm showing a detail of that textile.
yes, it's on the screen.
Okay. On their way, they decided to take rest in a cave. You can see Mahadev seated in a cave. As the bull and the buffalo were grazing together, meaning Shiva's Nandi and the buffalo, they were grazing together. The bull repeatedly kicked the buffalo, preventing him from eating the grass, showing his loyalty to Shiva. So he prevented him from eating the grass. As the starving buffalo got sick and emaciated, Parvati secretly removed the magical weapons from Mahadev's matted hair to revitalize him. There's a more detail about it that Parvati told Mahadev to put his head on her lap. As soon as his head touched her lap, he fell asleep and things like that. Okay, so as soon as Parvati put the weapons on the buffalo's head, he turned into an enormous demon and told Mahadev to give Parvati in marriage to him or give him a fight. Did you get all this? Am I clear?
Yes.
Okay. As Mahadev's magical weapons were now with the demon, Mahadev was helpless. He created a creature from his body dirt, which is a common feature in Rajasthan and Gujarat, that goddesses and gods, they rub the dirt from their body and put life into it, blow life into it, and create a creature. So Mahadev's magical weapon were now with the demon. Mahadev was helpless. He created a creature from his body dirt, gave him his damru, and asked him to go and wake up Shakti, who was in a deep slumber, and asked the Mahadev, and said, you go and say that Mahadev was in trouble and needed her help. Now you see the picture which is in front of you. On top of the cave or the hut, this Shakti is sleeping over there. She's in a slumber for eons. And on the right side and left side, you see the creature the creature was created from Mahadev's body dirt. He's holding a damru and he's trying to wake up Shakti to get up and, because Mahadev was calling. So this part is illustrated over here. And Mahadev was in trouble and needed her help. In fact, in the longer story, it even says that he said that there are prospects of getting the buffalo to eat, and then listening to this or hearing that, goddess's mouth watered. But I avoided that detail at the moment. Now, next slide, please. Got it?
Yes, it is here.
Yeah. In the meanwhile, the buffalo decked up as bridegroom. You can see there with garlands over his body and thing, and the goddess putting tilak on his forehead. Buffalo came to marry Parvati, who offered a forehead mark as a symbolic act of accepting him as husband. In this borrowed time, meaning in between, when Parvati was still entertaining him with receiving him, etc. Shakti, next slide, please.
Yes, it's here.
Okay. In this borrowed time, Shakti with other goddesses appeared and attacked the buffalo with a trident. Even in the previous slide, one goddess was attacking the buffalo from behind. Attacked the buffalo with a trident. but could not kill him, as he still possessed Mahadev's magical weapons. So he was still Mahadev, so to say. One of the goddesses tricked the buffalo to snatch away the weapons. The demon then was reduced to a normal buffalo who was killed by the goddesses. So in the picture in front of you, you see men, but these are shamans who are possessed by the goddesses, and therefore they are at the moment goddesses. And they have killed the buffalo and they are drinking the goddesses' blood. We also know in Hindu iconography, often some of the goddesses hold a copper in their hand and drink blood from that. Yeah. Now, I make a few remarks about these three myths which I collected. I have many more, but I'm only referring to these three. I'm mentioning these many more repeatedly because I think this whole motif prevails in at folk culture level, quite sort of widespread. In the first two stories, the king and the buffalo share the same persona. You see, in the first two stories, the king and the buffalo share the same persona, as in several myths just narrated from other regions of India, where Mahisha and Shiva are equated to be the same persona. You know, the husband and buffalo, demon and still husband, you know that. In the Vagri story, however, which I last narrated, the buffalo even acquires Shiva's status through Parvati's agency. Vagri story, however, the buffalo even acquires Shiva's status through Parvati's agency, because he then got Shiva's Shakti, in the sense his power, his godhood, his divine power, everything. Interestingly, in all three stories, the buffalo acts as a surrogate either for Shiva or the kings, which demands wider documentation and analysis of the vernacular material. What I collected is still nothing, though I worked 2 years. There is so much more that is available, and I think it can become a great project to collect this in future. This is my early work which I'm presenting, but I chose this material because this is Durga Bhagwat Endowment lecture, and I thought she was also dealing with vernacular material vis-a-vis Sanskrit. Let me now show you a few visuals of the ritual. I really must give you a statutory warning that there would be a little bit of bloodshed and things, so I hope you are ready for that. Let me now show you a few visuals of the ritual enactment of sacrifice of the buffalo bridegroom that was observed by me along with Eberhard Fischer and Hakusha near Ahmedabad in 1970s. Next slide, please.
Yes, it's there.
Okay, now we can see in this slide, in the background, there are several textile pieces which all depict various goddesses and their life stories, etc. So a kind of enclosure or a tent is created around a small cement shrine, and inside the shrine there is a picture of the goddess which is put, you can see behind the hand of the man. And the red cloth over there indicates that this goddess accepts blood sacrifice. And then people have gathered for buffalo sacrifice, which I observed, and I don't want to observe it once again. Let me assure you. Next, please.
It's there on the screen.
Yeah. Now, you know, bhuva is a word in Gujarat for shaman. Now, shaman, I'm using a word, shaman, from, but you know, there can be different words, and bhuva may not always be shaman, but for the time being, I use that word. So, because he gets possessed by a shaman, or bhuva gets possessed by the goddesses. So, bhuva or shamans dressed up as goddesses holding tridents and other weapons. You can see that?
Yes.
Yes. Now, next slide, please.
Yes, it's there.
Okay. Now, buffalo decked up as bridegroom is brought in front of the goddess exactly like in the textile piece, brought in front of the goddess or shaman. Here, goddess meaning shaman because he is possessed by the goddess. So he's brought in front of the goddess, possessed by the goddess, and kills the buffalo. So do you see the trident in two lower pictures?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Okay. So he kills the buffalo. Next, please.
It's on screen.
Yeah. So now I want to talk about these two. Do you see in the left side picture two people holding a curtain
Yes,
divider? Now,
yes,
this is very interesting that there was a movement, a kind of messianic movement all over India. And already, I think about at least a century old, as recorded by Christian missionaries. And there were people which is also known as Bhagathaization movement. So these Bhagats were going from village to village, particularly visiting scheduled castes and tribes, and asking them to take vows of not drinking alcohol or not eating meat and not making blood sacrifice or animal sacrifice. So this was a picture I took where two brothers lived together. The left side, the shrine was the shrine for where blood was to be offered. You can see on the floor perhaps some blood lying there.
yes,
And then a curtain was held because on the right side, the other brother's house was there, and that brother's family had become vegetarian. And therefore, between the two, a curtain is held. Now, this is under the effect of Bhagathaization, which is it's another thing we have not studied. All over India, even today, there is extraordinary movement, and this is not after the coming of RSS or anything. This was much before that. Like when I was doing my work in Wadli areas on Wadli painting, I found every second house door they had pasted, the Bhagats had pasted pictures, and they had given vows to Wadlis, and there was kind of Hinduization of the tribals was happening. And also in the house, I found popular prints of Hindu gods and goddesses pasted. So all this was happening under Bhagathaization movement. And right side, then you can see in the same slide that instead of offering buffalo, they are or any animal, they are offering rotis and rice balls. Can you see that?
yes, we can.
Okay, so this is the coming of vegetarianism through Bhagat movement or Messianic movement, as the Christian missionaries used to call in 19th and early 20th century. Now, next, please, next slide.
Yes, it's there.
Okay. Now, under the Bhagathaization movement, those who had taken a vow not to do blood sacrifice, on the left side of this, you see a man has created a buffalo from wheat flour and is cutting it. Unbelievable, because they had perhaps a decade ago, they were offering a blood sacrifice. So that still remains in their mind. So even when they become vegetarian, uh, they have, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so they are, that custom is still in their memory, and they still combine it with vegetarianism and Bhagatization. And the man on the right then is drinking a bowl of ghee, clarified butter, ghee. So this is in imitation of the other sacrifice which I don't want to show. I have a picture, but I don't want to show. There, after decapitating the buffalo head, they take out the main artery from the neck and suck the blood. As I said, Devi Mukhena Jagrahe Raktavijasya Shonitam, in that manner. Now, I shall now briefly discuss the iconography. Now, this is all Mahishasura. I shall now briefly discuss the iconography of Kali trampling upon Shiva and Mahishasura. Next slide, please.
It's there.
Okay. Now, until now, this iconography has been brushed aside as tantric, without much interpretation or without bringing into material of the kind I have brought. And this is what I brought is just a drop in the ocean, but there is much to explore. We have seen that in some myths, Mahishasura was a blessed devotee of Shiva. Let us see two related images of this iconography, and you have the two images in front of you. In the right side image, the goddess is shown trampling upon Shiva. In the left side image at bottom, she is trampling upon the anthropomorphic Mahisha. You see the decapitated body of buffalo is there, and under the body, buffalo's decapitated head is lying, and the human form Mahishasura will come out. Kali is trampling upon him.
Yes.
The demon who ensued from the decapitated body of the buffalo is lying there. If the reclining male figure in the right image is that of Shiva, on whom Kali is trampling, by implication, the corresponding figure in the left picture too should be that of Shiva in a way. However, the figure in this case is that of Mahisha. Considering the fact that in several myths quoted earlier from the Tamil region, from Maharashtra and from Gujarat, it becomes apparent that the buffalo or Mahisha often partake the form of Shiva, whom the goddess kills or tramples upon, and then in some versions performs expiation for her act. As in the Arunachal Purana mentioned earlier, Mahisha was a blessed devotee of Shiva who carried a crystal linga in his neck. In the Gujarat version, the buffalo obtains Mahadev's magical weapons and thereby becomes Shiva himself, legitimizing his demand to marry Parvati. As such, the final annihilation of the buffalo metaphorically becomes emblematic of Shiva's extermination. The objective here is to look at the motif of Kali trampling upon Shiva in the liminal space, between the Purana and the vestigial folk versions, because the left side bottom figure shows standing on Mahishasura who came out of the body, whereas in general other iconography it's always Shiva who is trampled upon by Durga, no, by Kali or Tara, two of the Dasha Mahavidyas. So in the liminal space between the Puranas and the vestigial folk version, to explore other dimensions of this perplexing iconography, we need to do a little more. But what material I have presented, I hope it sort of triggers thoughts in your mind to see the relationship, and also to realize that what, as I say, I repeat that what I've done or what others have done is just a drop in the ocean of what I have seen, and all this collected together, a lot of things can emerge. Now, let me end the talk with two images. Next slide, please.
Yes, it's there.
Hello?
Yes, it's there.
Okay, let me end the talk with two images of the artist Tayyab Mehta's Mahishasura series. For me, it is astounding that Tayyab Mehta was the only contemporary artist. I know that Hussein had done certain images, but I'm talking about some extraordinary perceptive series that Tayyab has done. So was the only contemporary artist who who thought of creating an incredible series of paintings based on the theme of Mahishasura. He, in a subtle manner, touches upon the contemporary issues of victimization, injustice, social discrimination, and above all the pain of marginalization. My tribute to Tayyab Mehta, and thanks Prabodh and the Mehta family for making these images available to me. And thank you, Asiatic Society, all the colleagues and the audience there. Thank you so much.
I request the audience, please put your questions in the chat box, and I will call out the questions for Dr. Jain to answer. But before starting, Dr. Jain, would you like to come back on the screen? Is your computer up and running?
Yeah, because light has come. I'll just go there. Just wait for a second.
Yes, please. Such a wonderful lecture. Wonderful lecture. I'm waiting to ask any questions because I'd like Dr. Jain to be back on the screen. Dr. Jain, are you able to see me now?
Yes, I can see you.
Okay, let me see. Somebody's unmuted, so there's a funny background. Just could you disconnect the phone now because I think it's causing reverberation.
Can you see me?
We can see you. Can you please close the connection on the phone? The other connection, which is still there, it's causing a noise.
Okay.
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having speaking this wonderful lecture. I'm sorry, I'm a little caught up also with the technology.
This is first time I'm really doing a lecture, which I've done a lot of webinars. And then the electricity went off because there's a big conflict between Delhi government and the central government with regard to coal supply, and therefore perhaps the Delhi government has to prove that they are really not having enough supply. I believe, I don't know. So anyway.
So I'd like to begin by asking a couple of questions while we wait for the audience to post theirs.
Yeah.
First of all, these stories are extraordinary.
Yeah.
And without creating any kind of hierarchy between whose story is Mahishasura's death.
Yeah.
How would you like to conceive the relationship between the Prakrit stories, the Apabhramsa stories, and the Sanskrit stories of the Devi?
Yeah, they can't be very categorical. As I said, these currents which are flowing, they're often intertwined. Now, for example, the name Bhavani or Mahadev. So all this shows that there's some reference to Hindu stories. But at the same time, I think there is some raw material, I'm calling it raw material, which is there perhaps before the Apabhramsa kind of influence that has come to them, because the names are from Sanskrit deities. And therefore, I feel that there is a kind of intertwining of local, because the rest of the story, for example, like taking away Mahadev's weapons or things like that, these are not coming from Puranic versions. And therefore, I think that today what we have is a kind of mixed picture. And I think what is important is the mixed picture element of that, because we cannot be looking for the original, neither in Sanskrit nor anywhere else, because cultures have assimilated and think, and it's not our job either to really separate the strands completely, but to look at the material, whether there is some kind of it inspires, or it sort of generates in our mind that there is at this stage, I would say, whether there is material worth exploring to get
clearer picture. So the entwined currents, I think, would be the main thing. And it's astonishing that king and the buffalo in several parts of India, no, and the king is not referred to at all as Mahadev, but the buffalo is continuously over there, and the buffalo and the king become one as Mahadev and buffalo are sort of identified with each other. So as a kind of, I don't like the word raw material, but just now I said that there's, because when I say raw material, it would mean as if there is this one-way current from one to the other. So it's not so, but I think there is a lot of this raw material lying somewhere or the other. In which one of, for example, when you look at the images of Kali or images of no. The goddess who drinks Chamunda. Now these images are really, though the names do occur in Sanskrit, but I think these have, I feel, something to do. And after seeing the kind of possession that happens, or the transformation of some kind of consciousness, no, consciousness is psychology, but I'm not doing that. But what I'm trying to say is that these goddesses somehow in my mind get related to these practices. And therefore, as I said, that I've not concluded anything. I'm not saying that what has come from where is difficult, but if I feel that what I did and what I presented, if it says that there is something more to the Sanskrit myths, and that there could be a connection, whether it is Prakrit, Sanskrit, or Apabhransha, doesn't matter. But if there is, then I feel that there is a possibility to do more exploration. And in our time, when Sanskrit myths are going to become more and more important, and in colonial period for other reasons, for the celebration of the classical, it was documented and things. So I feel that we need to explore, and I hope that much I was able to do by showing the material.
I'd like to thank you so much. I'd like you to also talk a little bit. I'm going to ask you two more questions after this one, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience. I'd like you to discuss a little bit about what is the conception of that earthly buffalo that is sacrificed.
What is the?
What is the conception of the earthly buffalo that is sacrificed?
What's the adjective of the buffalo you said?
Earthly, the earthly buffalo, not the mythic buffalo, but
Yeah.
the earthly buffalo. EARTHLY, the earthly buffalo. I'm sorry, the connection might be poor.
Yeah. So you see, it happens, it does, like say, what is, say, Poti Raju, for example. He's not really Shiva in that sense, you know. Also, the demon in my Gujarati myth, once his weapons were taken away, he's reduced to an ordinary buffalo, and ordinarily killed, and feast happens. So, but I think that if you look at the rituals and myths, most cases the buffalo worship or buffalo sacrifice is among the so-called lower caste. And therefore, this social strata, lower social strata, the so-called, and the connection with the buffalo, like Kosambi says something which is, I think, too generalized, and he says that it is the merging of two cults. When the buffalo cult came to certain regions of Maharashtra, where a Devi cult existed, and Devi did not have a spouse, and then the buffalo, so you know, but I think this is too generalized and too, there isn't enough material to show that. But I think uh, I tell you the earthly connection. For example, when the goddess says that uh, that creature made from body dirt tells Shakti, which I didn't mention too much, but just refer to, that you will get a buffalo to eat. And that time, the myth which I didn't mention in my shortened version, that the goddess's Shakti's mouth watered.
Oh,
The
that's
when
pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. So now there it is ordinary buffalo and all feasting, and in the ritual also. The buffalo is killed. After that whole night there is feast of cooking, eating, etc. And I remember when I first time presented this uh, uh, in Washington D.C. When Festival of India took place, and I presented some of my material in a lecture there, where Wendy Doninger was present. And when I said this, that I read out the myth and I said, the goddess Shakti's mouth watered, you won't believe that in front of the entire audience, she came to the stage running and gave me a kiss. And in the mic, she said, I'm so fascinated, the Shakti's mouth watered. Now, is that earthly buffalo you're talking about. I think at that level, at the level of sacrifice, this also happens, But why constantly buffalo, killing of buffalo and king, buffalo and Mahadev? This is something, it can't be just, it is all over India. Even right in Nepal, which I have not studied, but I know that there are rituals related to that. So I think this has not yet been sorted out, this whole enigma. I think one would need to collect more materials, because I did not really want to generalize uh, uh, based on this material, but therefore I said this material was more indicative, and but indicative enough, I think, that uh, and to read that material in conjunction with Sanskrit myths.
Thank you. That was a wonderful response. That moment when the buffalo and the human being become one.
Yeah.
That earthliness becomes very important.
Yeah. And also this Gaudakona and husband buffalo thing is quite amazing, which Whitehead had recorded.
I'd like to ask you one more question. How do you see the aestheticization of the Devi's violence? I'm not talking of the Devi's violence, the violent act of the Devi. The aestheticization of it, not just in the story itself, but also in the art that you have shown, but also in the very act of sacrifice. It's an aesthetic experience. There are lamps, there are lights, there's colors, there's organization of various materials, there's songs, there's a whole performance that's set up. If you could speak a little bit about that. And then I'd like to conclude my questioning by asking a sort of summing question, which is, how do you see, how would you like us to think about the importance of studying this material today? In this moment, at the second decade of actually the third decade of the 21st century.
I know what you're heading to.
You have worked so long that you have seen the transformation of how we engage with this material, from Henry Whitehead to Tayyab Mehta to now the larger issue of Mahishasura.
Yes. So you mentioned Tayyab now. My answer was going to be that what I said about Tayyab is actually, you're talking about this time, our contemporary time. The issues that I mentioned while referring to Tayyab were pertains to what you are saying, that in our time, I mean, and also relation of buffalo to certain castes, then also the whole upper caste strata, and goddess being in both areas and thing, and that is what connects also the local material and the Sanskritic material and the ritual. So therefore, it's even more rich that that local level practices and myths and thing, and the whole issue of caste discrimination. Why buffalo is always with lower caste, and still the goddess relation always occurs somehow or the other, directly or indirectly. So I think that the issue of marginalization, etc., which I mentioned in Tayyab's thing. And if you've seen Tayyab's painting properly, there is, and that's where Hussein's painting for me differ from Tayyab prominently, because in Tayyab's case, buffalo is sad, but not more expressive than silent. And I think this has a lot to do with what is happening in our time at social level.
Thank you so much. I would like you to just, if you could address the question of aestheticizing that whole violence, of the Devi's violence.
But aestheticizing where? In the textile, you mean?
Everywhere, in the textile, in developing a story form, in the whole puja and the setting of the puja, and also the immense beauty of both the buffalo and the goddess.
Yeah. Now, the question is, who is aestheticizing, isn't it?
That's right.
Yes. So now we can go into who is endorsing our museums, who is endorsing our glossy art history books, who is who is aestheticizing you have asked a very important question, because who is aestheticizing it? We are doing this, and that is where I think that we need to de-aestheticize. Is it possible? As long as museums, the artistry, the discipline of artistry, the way it is, it remains. I don't think that we can de-aestheticize. Like in the West, there is now huge talk about decolonizing museums. The same thing that they want to say, that we can decolonize museum by lending you your objects for an exhibition, showing you on internet the material that we have. Does it really help? Because if you do accept the loan, then you endorse that the objects which are in your collection are yours, but you are loaning. So you accept the loan, you do that. Same is, I think, is the question of aestheticizing, in the sense that a talk like this also has an element of aestheticizing. But what I think the issue of museum is still very directly connected with aestheticizing. But I think what is there that is not aestheticized in that sense of in the entire discipline of artistry.
The whole experience of the sacrifice and the engagement with the buffalo, that it's the aestheticization of this whole experience of sacrifice itself is part of that process. But there's the way that we engage with that is different at different places and at different levels.
Yeah.
Shall I open up it? Shall I open up the questions from the audience now? Will you take them, please?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
If there is any question.
Oh, there's so many questions. So Renu Parekh says, excellent session. Mangala Sardesh Pandey has a question.
Yeah.
Are Durga and Kali two faces of Devi?
Uh, why two? The Devi has so many faces and so many names, and even in the canonical literature itself, there are so many faces. I think this also relates to the. This is very important. What I'm saying. This also relates to the issue of merging of cults. I give an example. All over Gujarat, where I've worked in Kutch and thing, dotted with memorial stones. And many memorial stones show these are related to satis, for example. Upper half of the stone has a panel showing a hand which represents sati, but lower half has a depiction of Amba, because Amba Mata in Gujarat very, but any goddess, Now sati becomes identified with the goddess, and that's what the memorial stone is saying. And therefore, a regional shrine of sati, like in Jhunjhunu, a shrine of sati has become so big. So goddesses keep emerging. This is a process at local level, but that process also must have existed in Sanskrit, because in Sanskrit canonical literature, merging of gods and goddesses continue. They say, oh, this is a form of Durga, oh, this is a form of Kali. And some characteristics of Durga or some characteristics of Kali are picked, and then affiliations are made. So I think that this process is very well known, uh, that that so many goddesses emerge, and continuously they would say that this is a form of Durga, this is a form of, though there are different names and things, and different legends also connect them quite often. So I think why only talk about whether Kali or Durga are a form of what? Shakti, who is Shakti, for example? Why Shakti was called by Mahadev, though Parvati was his wife, was she not Shakti in that sense? The Shakti was called what Parvati could not do. So, there is, I think the whole material is so deeply intertwined that I think it would be difficult to say whether, because according to one version, it would be like this, and immediately next version, with even in canonical literature, would be, uh, what is this?
That's fine. You're visible.
Okay, but you can't see me now.
We can see you.
Okay, great.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful.
Sure. So because it is, if we know it so well that there is a form of so and so. This is a form. Vishnu has this incarnation and that incarnation and this form, and so this is like all extremely densely interwoven mythology, in which we can't really say categorically that yes, Kali is a form of Durga, or Durga is a form of Shakti, or Shakti is a form of Parvati, or it keeps intermingling.
To add to this question that Mangala Sardesh Pandey has raised, you spoke about one of the myths. The Devi is not presented as a pativrata. She's presented as a deeply complex figure. I wonder if you could just connect her complexity from that story to what you just said about the continual emergence of the goddess in different forms.
But the question of pativrata comes only in the case of consorts. But there are goddesses who are Kumaris, and there are goddesses who are not married, and even Shakti, for example. The appellation is also as good for Parvati, for example. So only consorts like Parvati, there would be a question of pativrata. And we have seen in the Gujarat myth, whatever happened to her pativrata element, even for a while, and this can't be put aside, because they would not really be flippant about it, so there is something about it, and the whole story has a consistency in the narrative. Therefore, again,
somebody
Uh,
is to me.
so can you still see me and I see you?
Of course, of course. Let
Okay.
me raise the
Now-
next question.
Yeah.
Well, Prabodh has said that that certainly was a very provocative.
Who
and-
said?
Prabodh and Rahul, I think, is
Prabodh? Prabodh?
Prabodh.
Goodbye.
Prabodh Parekh or?
I guess it's Prabodh Parekh. He has said that it's a very provocative presentation.
But he can't hear me or?
He can hear you. I think he can hear you.
Yeah, anyway, because I wanted to thank him once again that last moment, just 24 hours before, I asked him whether I can get images of, hi Prabodh. Yeah, so he in 24 hours arranged for these images of Tayyab. I was very keen on doing that. And Prabodh may remember that 10 years ago, you had asked me to do an article on Tayyab in the background of Mahishasuramardini, but that time somehow or the other, it didn't work for some reason or the other. So today I had an opportunity, and thank you so much that I was able to conclude the lecture, not only with his images, but with the social issues that arise in today's time. And therefore, I was able to contextualize the myth in today's context.
Thank you. Thank you, Prabodh Parekh, from my side as well. I'd like you to ask another question. Renu Parekh has asked, is there similar textile art like the Matani Pachedis found in Baluchistan, Sindh, as you mentioned in your talk?
In Sindh, yes. What has happened is that after the separation of Pakistan, there was a lot of, the Hindu community. Actually, you'll be amazed because I have also done a lot of work on embroidery traditions, etc. of Kutch. And Kutchi embroidery and Sindhi embroidery and Sindhi communities, the Islamic and Hindu communities in Sindh are exactly the same gotras, same communities, same goddesses. So it was prevalent all over. And in Sindh area, in any case, these are found. But as far as I know, that these Pachedis would be beyond Sindh also. Once upon a time, or until recent decades, these were definitely there in Sindh in any case.
Thank you for that. The next question comes from Mangala. Let me ask somebody else's question, and then if we have time, I'll come back to Mangala's question.
Yeah.
Our goddess, an anonymous person who's only identified as iPhone is asking, are goddesses upper class?
Yes. And, first of all, let me answer it from the feminist viewpoint. That there is such a conflicting thing about male and female gods and goddesses. Say, for example, everyone would say, oh, in Hinduism, goddess is ultimate. Gods, when they were completely helpless, they created a goddess to, goddesses like, are placed above. The gods were helpless, and therefore a goddess had to be created. And at the same time, we all know that there is extreme amount of patriarchy in the Hindu pantheon. So this is again a question of it's a question of context in which certain things are, because mythology is not just one running thing, and therefore I said that my narrative will not be linear or historical, but it would be configurative. And I think Hindu mythology is so highly configurative that it revolves, and I think it would be difficult to say this or that.
Thank you so much for a wonderful conception of not linear or narrative, but configurative. That's a wonderful, it creates a shape of the things. And
Yeah.
it configures a set of relationships between animal, human, divine, time, so many different things.
I know. And this was I was told 45 minutes, but Minalji had told me that you can do a little more. I think I did a little more, but there's so much material, so I had to compact it in this short time. So much is left out, but still I hope it gave some insight into what is still to be explored and is dying by the minute. Because these stories are, of course, not dying in the sense they are undergoing transformation. And we know how through political and social changes that happen, these transformations are so quick. And I can't say more, all of you, what's going on in that turmoil. And I think myths would be re-narrated, reinterpreted, and which itself is interesting, of course, that under a certain current, political current and thing, myths do change. But at the same time, I think the change myths are so important because they tell us about the time in which, or about the ideologies in a given time have influenced myths. And this is going on for centuries, not only now.
There's a question from PS. I'd like to ask about spatiality. What is the idea of space? There's a sense of practice, a sense of objects, a sense of social relationships. What is the sense of space, Dr. Jain? Anything to say on this?
It's a difficult question in the sense that space can be physical, can be mental, space can be mythical, and therefore I think it would be, but I still would think that we can talk about the mythical space, because we are though you had asked me a question about earthly buffalo. So yes, but still I think we were still operating in a mythical space, and that space is communal in the sense of community-based, not communal in the other sense. Community-based, it's a space which is ritual-based, it is customs-based, worship-based, faith-based, and at the same time, completely, into inverted commas, secularized. Same space, So there are many spaces that are operating here. And why only space? Time, the mythical time, the time in which this is narrated. So I think we cannot separate, in this case, the space from mythical time as such. And this time, like the space, it keeps altering it from divine to earthly.
Thank you so much. There's a comment, Prabodh Parik, to say someday you must talk more about the question of de-aestheticizing. That's a very nice suggestion from Mr. Parik.
Yeah.
A comment from Shukla Sawant. Thank you, Dr. Jain. Every time I hear you present this material, I come away with something new. I am particularly impressed that you have, given the current climate of suppression of academic freedoms, not shied away from presenting some powerful ideas. Bravo. Hear, hear.
Yeah, thanks.
Now there are two questions left from two people. I'd like to return to them before concluding for the day because they're here and they're good questions.
Yeah.
Mangala Sardesh Pandey would like to know, how would you explain the ambivalence and ambiguity in Durga's attitude towards Mahishasura? I love this question. Desire to destroy and strange attraction as well.
Yeah. So I think you said you love the question, and I said that's the word, the ambiguity, and therefore, sort of cheating upon Mahadev is an extraordinary story that she goes to that extent, and she still receives the bridegroom. Another goddess comes with the trident, but she herself had this double space in which she works, space of mind or thought, or her attachment, or because she's not shying away from her attachment, to the lustrous buffalo. And this is, I think, for my feeling, a kind of, what she says is a kind of paradox that exists. And this paradox comes out so beautifully in the last story of mine from Gujarat, about the goddess's infatuation. And the narrator says that Mahadev, knowing well her infatuation, refuses to bring the buffalo back to life. So the element of envy, jealousy, everything earthly again, and at the same time, so it's when I got this myth, I was, for days together, I was intoxicated.
There's a question, the last question, Renu Parekh's question. Are there any songs, performing arts also associated with these rituals?
Yes, all what I said are related to songs, in fact, the stories. So what are these songs? I've done work besides this in other areas on invocation. These are all invocation songs. So when the goddess is invoked, before that they sing. So they use damru, they use thali and a stake and thing, and they sing these songs. Both Rajasthan and Gujarat, I have in my a book of mine was never published in English. It was my first doctorate thesis. It was called Babaji and Devi, meaning ancestor worship and Devi, possession and crime in South Rajasthan. That was my doctorate thesis, and there also the way Babajis or ancestors died prematurely in an accident or in a plundering raid. They were killed by the policemen of the Raja of that region. These people would appear as deities, and they are pacified. For invoking them, the songs are sung. So that time I traveled from shrine to shrine and village to village with huge over tape recorder, which was so heavy on my shoulder, and climbing hills and things and recording. So these were all songs of invocation. And interestingly, these were biographies of the Babaji or the ancestor, how he died. So like that, the songs which, the stories that I presented are actually invocation songs. But no shrine will sing the entire song in one go. It's interesting. They will sing to a point till when the goddess comes into the body of the shaman. The moment happened, they stop. So you have to visit, you have to go from shrine to shrine to collect pieces. And this is what I was doing for my doctorate thesis in Rajasthan. So the moment goddess comes, they stop. So you have half the story with you. And then in another village nearby or in the same shrine, you might get, and often the shamans abuse the goddess. You won't believe. The dirtiest abuse is they hurl at the goddess, saying that the bhopas have become thin, waiting for you. Why are you not coming? So they go on singing and they abuse the goddess. So she gets angry and comes into the body of the shaman.
Beautiful. The last question, in what language would these songs be in? And are there any special, the Renuji is asking, are there any special shlokas? So you please answer this and then we'll hand it over to Meenalji.
Yeah. So language is like, see, in Rajasthan, where I work was southern Rajasthan. That is where my mother comes from, and I grew up in that area. Though I worked among the tribals, Bhils and Meena, but we all know that Bhils and Meena, they speak the now almost the same language, which is Mewari Wagri. So Grierson, in his volumes of Linguistic Survey of India, he said that the only dialect for which samples are not forthcoming is Mewari Wagri. So in my doctorate thesis, I said, here are number of samples of Mewari Wagri in which the songs I had recorded and then transliterated and translated and published in my book. So in Rajasthan, it was that. My Gujarati is as good, including the dialects of Saurashtra, and Prabodh would bear me out that my understanding of local Gujarati, and then I've done a lot of work, field work. So, and of course, I took help once in a while for a particular word from the local informants. But so I worked in areas where I know the languages very well, including the dialects.
Thank you so much
Thank you.
for this wonderful session. I think for me, the beauty of your talk is that there's no neat answer for any sphere in our world today. There's no neat answers for academia. There are no neat answers for any political ideologies.
Yes.
Are there any neat answers for the gods and the humans?
Yeah.
This is or animals, actually.
Yeah.
And what these stories tell us is the profound importance of interrelationship, or conceiving interrelationship, for configuring our human experience and the experience of the world.
That's why, you see, it is prakrit, the way it is, and it is not samakrita, meaning interpreted, refined, and removed certain elements. It's not so. So it's not Sanskritized. It is still closer to nature. But I'm not saying it is the purest. What is purest?
Right.
What is purity, anyway?
Thank you so much for this wonderful talk. Aminaji, I'm going to leave it to you.
Well, I don't know. I'm just so overwhelmed. I don't know what to say. So I'll just say very formally that it just gives me immense pleasure to thank you, Dr. Jain, for a truly fascinating and edifying lecture.
I hope it worked on my telephone. Did it?
It did.
And we
Because
thank
here you even though we
audience
couldn't
for their
see you.
intense patience.
Yes, yes. And you know, it is really fortuitous that you should be talking about the goddess this week, because we've been waiting for your lecture since last year. And then it's been given at particularly this point in time, because we all know that the power of the Devi is at its peak during the Navaratras.
Yeah.
And Devi worship
True.
has a strong hold on popular imagination, and
Yeah.
therefore for us too. So, I mean, you have just brought such a tremendous fund of knowledge to us. It has been a remarkable learning experience and a truly meaningful way of honoring the memory of our former member, Durga Bhagwat, who was a legendary figure in our society. And so we salute you, Dr. Jain. Thank you ever so much. I could go on and on, but I don't think the audience wants to hear me anymore. But I must thank Dr. Garimella, because your comments, your contribution have been thought-provoking, most enriching also. Thank you for so graciously accepting our invitation and continuing the engaging discussion on Dr. Jain's lecture. And let me end by saying that we would love to welcome both of you in the Darbar Hall of our society as soon as it would be possible. And we would love to have an in-person lecture from both of you at separate times.
Certainly.
I thank all.
You have heard Annapurna earlier. She's
No,
brilliant.
we haven't. We haven't.
Wants to do this.
Then we will get her to give a talk next year.
Yeah.
You know, thank you for introducing her to us, Dr. Jain. And so we'll book her for next year. Let's see for what. And I want to also thank the participants for their presence. Without them, their curiosity and their interest, it would not have been the same thing at all. So thank you very much. I'm not sure that members of the Durga Bai's family are not here today. Normally we have Dr. Shirish and Charu. I don't think they are here today, but they always support this lecture. And lastly, I have to thank the technical team, our Honorary Secretary Usha Vijayalakshmi, Dr. Usha Vijayalakshmi, at the last minute found that she had to attend another meeting. So she requested a student of hers, Neha Matre, to take over. And Neha has done such a good job in spite of all the glitches with the internet. She was coming on and off, but she managed the slide
So
so
confident.
beautifully.
Actually, because I must say that I thought we'll have to cancel because I didn't know technologically that much that, but you suggested to talk on my phone and I thought it won't work, but it worked out, it seems.
No, I think Neha guided you, as to what exactly you should do. I just gave you a general thing, switch off your Wi-Fi and just use 4G. But I think she took you through the steps. And so here we are. We've had your lecture and we've enjoyed it so much. Thank you again. Thank you
Thank you.
Good night.
very much indeed.
Thanks.
And good night and see you again soon. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.